painting graphically illustrates the point that for all its strengths, the .58 caliber rifled musket did not have a volume of fire that was compatible with its accuracy. If soldiers were extended in any sort of skirmish line, their massed volume of fire was so low that they might well be overrun. This problem could in some measure be solved with a breech-loading weapon. The U.S. Indian Wars provide some perfect examples of the changes wrought by the breech-loader when it replaced the muzzle-loading rifled musket. It would perhaps be profitable to start with the war between the states. Many historians are prone to criticize the decision makers in the war between the states as being stupid. The historians say that machine guns and repeating rifles were available. Anyone should have seen their superiority and should have adopted them immediately. Such historians are technical illiterates. The weapons of the war between the states were 19th century weapons and were in no way equivalent to anything we conceive of in the 20th century. For example, to characterize a Gatling gun as a machine gun is the grossest possible twisting of the term. The same is true of the breech-loading and repeating rifles and carbines of the war between the states era. Though they had a greater volume of fire than the rifled musket, those breech-loaders and repeaters that did actually work, and there were few of those, suffered severe limitations in combat range. Further, at any one time, there were at least 15 or 20 competing designs of breech-loaders and repeaters being shown to the Army. Each one was totally different in design and function and took a completely different type and caliber of ammunition. However, each one had at least one salesman who could put on a demonstration proving his to be better than the others. Normally, that salesman had more than a little political clout from some fellow in Congress. Regardless of what the salesman showed, cartridge cases and rifle designs were in their infancy and were not up to the claims made for them. When issued in the field, breech-loaders like the Joslin were discarded immediately, for they were not worth carrying. Lastly, you should understand that the manufacturing plants, though much better in the North than in the South, were still not capable of producing breech-loaders or repeaters in the necessary millions of copies, nor ammunition for them in the required billions of rounds. Given these limitations in manufacturing, the short combat range, the technical infancy and unreliability of the breech-loaders and the cartridge cases, there were very good reasons for retaining the .58 caliber rifled musket as the primary shoulder weapon during the war. By 1866, however, things were changing. The attention that the war focused on the problem of breech-loaders began to result in some very sound designs. Further, cartridge cases were rapidly improving, and the industrial capacity of the North found that post-war demand was more in line with what they could produce. Into this arena stepped Mr. Erskine Allen, a toolmaker at the Springfield Armory. He patented and showed to the Army his method of converting the Springfield rifled musket into a breech loader. His basic idea was to cut out the breech area of the rifled musket. The resulting trough was filled with a breech block that pivoted upwards like a trap door. After discharge, the hammer was cocked, the lock released, and the breech raised. This extracted and ejected the old cartridge. The shooter then thumbed a new cartridge into the chamber, closed the breech, and was ready to fire. The first Allen conversion was chambered for a metallic cartridge which roughly duplicated the ballistics of the .58 caliber rifled musket. By 1866, his second model conversion, which included relining the barrel to accept a .50 caliber center fire cartridge, was deemed suitable for general military use. I should emphasize here that none of this was possible without a practical centerfire cartridge case. The case held powder, bullet, and primer in one package. The cartridge case also served double duty by expanding against the chamber on discharge and sealing the powder gases in the barrel. This cartridge case is critical. The breechloader held the cartridge case, and the case sealed the gases. Back to Mr. Allen's rifle, it was adopted in July of 1866 and put into immediate production. By January of 1867, the first shipments of these rifles were on their way west. These rifles arrived on the frontier none too soon. Serious social discussions with the Sioux Indians were reaching a fever pitch along the Bozeman Trail in Wyoming and Montana during the period 1866 and 67. The Fetterman Massacre had just occurred, and the Army, with its post-war reductions in manpower, was having trouble holding on. The two major forts in the area, Fort Phil Kearny and Fort C.F. Smith, were adequately garrisoned and suffered no major risk of being directly overrun, but their wood-cutting and hay and water-gathering parties were in considerable danger. When confronted with isolated parties of whites, Indian tactics were simple. They attempted to close the range as much as possible, preferably by ruse or surprise. When it was time to join battle, they normally had one or two warriors expose themselves as firing dummies. As soon as the first volley was fired by the whites, the remaining Indians would charge pell-mell, knowing that at worst, the whites with muzzleloaders could fire one more volley before being overrun. In August of 1867, the Indians tried this at a hayfield outside Fort C.F. Smith and in a wood-cutting area outside Fort Phil Kearny. In both cases, they met with a large surprise as they suffered volley after volley in rapid succession. A comparison of what they expected and what they got looks like this. Let's go to the chart. We list the combat range of the breechloader as being slightly better than the rifled musket because of the breechloader's higher velocity and better ballistic coefficient. Its volume of fire is easily double that of the rifled musket. As the range decreased and the need for adjusting sights or attaining a good sight picture consequently decreased, a good soldier with a breechloader could increase this rate of fire. It was not uncommon at close ranges for a breechloader to put out 9 or even 10 rounds a minute. This increase in volume is such that it paid the soldier to manipulate his weapon and continue to fire as the enemy closed, rather than give up firing and fix bayonets for a final contest. Our example pointed this out well. The breechloader had gotten off 7 rounds in the same period that the muzzleloader had fired 2 and was midway through the loading cycle of his 3rd round. The breechloader could continue to fire while the soldier armed with the muzzleloader had no choice but to fix bayonets. Erskine Allen's design would go through many modifications. Starting in 1873, it would be newly manufactured in .45-70 caliber as the Model 1873 Springfield. All told, over 650,000 Allen rifles would be made. Erskine Allen won the Wagon Box Fight and helped open the trails west.
The preceding was a television presentation of the Audiovisual Instructional Technology Division, United States Military Academy.